Everything runs through
TechNTortillas.
Everything runs through
TechNTortillas.
Good afternoon and welcome to Tortilla Talk with your host Troy. And today we have Dallas and Anthony with us. So different crew than you're used to, but I want to welcome everybody. What a week for Texas Tech. Flip it over to Anthony. How are you doing, man?
Fantastic. Great day yesterday. Great step forward for the program. Great win. Faced some adversity, overcame it. Love to see it.
Yeah, talk about adversity. That game was stressful for about 3.5 quarters. We'll touch on that soon. But Dallas, how are you doing?
Good, man. I was so nervous for this game like all week. Many have been saying that this is going to be the biggest game in the Big 12 schedule for the whole year. Uh, we'll see how Utah looks for the remainder of the year, but just what a huge win. I mean, I think they said that was our first ranked road win since 2008 or something, but
Yeah, amazing.
pretty wild.
I mean, definitely lived up to the expectations. And so with that, we're going to get right into it then. Utah versus Texas Tech, 16 Utah versus number 17 Texas Tech, ranked matchup. And obviously it was in Salt Lake City. So what a match, what an atmosphere, big noon kickoff. And so what a game. I mean, we'll start off with that. I mean, what were your overall thoughts from the game, Dallas?
Yeah, I mean, I think Tech came out and especially like on defense just proved how elite we are. I don't know how you could point to any front seven in the country and confidently say they're better than what we have in Lubbock. Like J-Rod was all over the place. Ben Roberts was making plays. John Curry has been amazing all year. And then that front seven, I thought, Lee Hunter and Skylar Gill Howard were making plays all over the field. But I thought that Romello Height and David Bailey, like the knock on them for their whole career is how do they hold up against the run? And I mean, I think you saw that they set the edge of the defense great. They were in on some tackles. Bailey had a sack at the end of the game. I think the whole front seven just did wonders for the reputation of the team on defense, and then their individual draft stock had to have gone up.
Yeah, with all the scouts there. I mean, what they said, there were 19 different scouts there. And, the expectation coming into the game was you had, a top rushing attack from Utah versus a Texas Tech defense that we weren't sure about yet. And I think, we lived up to the expectation we were aware of. But what an impressive outing from that front seven. And really the corners and safeties played pretty well as well. I mean, yeah, there wasn't much to complain about. Anthony, what were some of your takeaways?
I mean, just echoing Dallas, like obviously the defense played amazing. They hit hard, they got to the ball, the defense played decently disciplined all game. Anytime you have, was it 15 penalties and was 7 false starts?
Yeah.
Some
7 or 8, yeah.
That's always a real cause for concern. I know, it's been floating around there. They even mentioned on the broadcast that like need to go to a silent count there. Towards the end of the first half, I was a little nervous that it would become kind of typical Tech. They kind of puckered there. The Balfour pass interference where he just hugged him. I don't know. I mean, it's always hard to read the tea leaves there because you don't know if he doesn't have safety help, if he knows he's beat, if that had to happen so they wouldn't score. And then obviously the roughing the kicker where he missed that. The Utah kicker missed the field goal and then got 15 yards close for another shot at it. But they held their water. They stayed strong and got through it.
Yeah, I mean, bunch of takeaways there. I think holding a Utah rushing attack that was averaging close to 300 yards a game to close to 100 was super impressive. And we've talked about it at length, the penalties. I think it's at 14 for 122 yards, and it just felt like throughout the game that was going to come back and bite us. That 3 points at the end of the half was an excellent example of that. And then to start the second half, what was it, like 3 straight penalties back to back? And just, it really did feel like typical Tech, which I know all of us have gone through that for years and years. And so luckily we were able to right some demons and, get over it. And I thought, Dallas, we were talking about the game after the game presser with Joey. I just really appreciate his self-awareness, because even he was like, yeah, we know my woes on the road basically. And, he brought that up, and boy, did they go into a road environment and show out. But with that, let's start off with the offensive side of the ball. What were your takeaways there, Dallas?
Yeah, I mean, I think that each game we've seen the offensive line and the running backs get stronger in the run game. I thought that this was Cam Dickey's best game of the season, like by far. He was really good in pass pro and made some guys miss. I think Utah had 24 missed tackles on the game. And then, Jacoby Williams is just a big play waiting to happen. So I was really impressed with those guys. Our receivers, I thought, had a great game, other than maybe Coy Aiken getting that ball stripped out of his arms in the end zone. But other than that, there were some big plays that were made. They got called back because of the penalties. One to Caleb Douglas down the field.
Mm-hmm.
Just, I mean, overall, I know that the penalties were an issue. I kind of blame that on coaching for not having a silent count ready. I don't know how that's just not in your bag. I think Joey said that, they've just never had to use one, so I guess they didn't
Mm-hmm.
prepare for it. But I think, after 2, 3 false starts, um, get over on the sideline, see if you can figure something out real quick. Like, it's not rocket science. I would assume that every team in the country had that ready. But maybe just, where Leftwich comes from. He hadn't played in an environment like that as loud, and uh, some of the places that Joey's played at just hadn't seen that. But I was surprised on that end, just kind of a coaching misstep. But yeah, I really impressed, like in the fourth quarter, with how we wore down Utah's defense, and we'll get into the Hammond versus Morton debate. But I thought that Hammond did get a little bit of the benefit of playing against a pretty gassed Utah team, because despite all the penalties and stuff, we still had almost 500 yards of offense for the day.
Yeah, I mean, luckily it wasn't a costly mistake to not be able to switch to that silent count, and so we were able to continue banging the rock. I did like that they started being more dependent on the run. I was a little worried about that coming into the game, because we weren't quite sure that we hadn't really faced a rushing defense that we had to worry about, and I think they were all very dependable. There were a couple of chunk plays that each of them had, and the emergence of Cam Dickey was huge. That touchdown that he had, where it was just like he broke out of nowhere. I was surprised they didn't blow the whistle, and then he goes and rushes for like 20 yards or 15 yards or whatever it was and gets a TD. That was awesome. Anthony, any major takeaways for you from the offense?
Oh man, Will Hammond can sling it. Got some pop on those throws.
Yeah, I've always thought he's got
that was my biggest thing.
Yeah, he's got a heck of an arm, and there were a couple of games last year. I'm drawing a blank on the one where whenever you game plan for the starting quarterback, and then the second one's a dual threat. That's another advantage that obviously you're aware of that, and you wouldn't be surprised if we have packages where Hammond's going to get in there and have that QB power type stuff. So obviously they're prepared for it. So, but it was nice to see him jump in a game with that high of stakes and be able to perform, because obviously his ceiling is super high, but you just worry about the experience and going into a Utah environment where you get thrusted into a game. That is the hardest environment that he'll play in all year. So he showed up, showed out, and was able to perform, which was super exciting. Dallas, you touched on the receivers. I was curious because obviously with the game was close, like there was going to need to be dependable hands, and I think all of them showed that they were pretty dependable for the most part. I mean, there are some contested catches that they all made, really. And so that third down type blanket, I was curious who was going to emerge there, but it really seems like they all had that veteran type leadership to kind of weather the storm there. I mean, Virgil did. Douglas came up pretty big a few times as well. And then Terrence Carter down the stretch to get that touchdown. Only really disappointing thing there was that missed throw. I mean, you had Aiken and Carter open on that and just threw it to the wrong shoulder. But outside of that, obviously, Hammond played awesome, and so did the receivers running back. So just took a little while to get going, unfortunately. But, what a great way to end the game. We'll transition over to defense. I mean, what were y'all's thoughts on that? I mean, what a performance, Dallas.
Yeah, this is one of those games where like my brain going into it was saying like Tech really should be able to win this up front, but the traumatized Tech fan in me over the past like 10, 15 years was like running quarterback. Oh no, we're screwed. But like that front seven just totally dominated. Devin Dampier looked horrible. We were able to keep him under 5 yards an attempt passing the ball. I mean, just total domination. I think if this defense can continue to do this through the Big 12 season, I mean, I don't know who can contend with that, because I think that's probably the best defense you're going to go up against on offense, and you still put up 34. And I don't see another team that's going to be able to maybe run the ball against you, like just period.
Yeah, and I mean, obviously that style isn't going to be the same, and we don't have TCU or Baylor on the schedule, but you think about some of the dominant quarterbacks that are in this league, and Dampier, there was a lot to write about their rushing attack, but I mean, the passing attack for them just didn't look very impressive. I mean, he missed a decent amount of throws, so we were fortunate there. So I'll be really curious going forward what that looks like against a more accurate quarterback possibly. But I mean, ESPN, game day was talking about, everybody chose Utah and talked about how they were going to run all over us. And, credit to the front seven. I mean, they really couldn't get anything going. We kept them behind the chains for the most part, and we're able to get them in third and longs. And they really didn't have a game plan for that. It felt like, or maybe Dampier was just not, effective enough in those situations. And so, yeah, that was extremely exciting to see. Anthony, what were your takeaways from the D?
Just kind of echoing Dallas, they played really well. Dampier really only had 3 shots the whole game. The first was that 73-yard touchdown pass that was called back for the lineman downfield. And I don't know what happened there. That was a pass all the way, and the tackle was 5 yards. Like
Yeah,
I
he was
don't know.
pretty.
I don't know how that happened. But
Whittingham said
fortunate
that
for us.
he didn't get the whole play call, and that's why he was downfield. But yeah.
I mean, that would make sense. The second one was that 52-yarder, big play right there. And then there was a third play where Dampier just missed a wide open. I forget who the receiver was, but he just missed a wide open guy really, really deep in Tech territory. They played disciplined football. They stuck with their gaps. They set the edge. They came downhill on the tailback. Dampier couldn't scoot anywhere. The punching of the ball, obviously, with the 2 fumble recoveries there, they just looked like a solid unit. The back end held up well. The pass interference, that's kind of whatever. And then Utah lives off of those their explosive plays come from those kind of blown coverages, from what I've been hearing. So I think they did pretty good to avoid that.
Yeah, you held the Utah team to 3.5 or 3.3 yards a carry, so that was really impressive. And so just super exciting to see. The turnovers were huge too, right? 4 turnovers. I was curious if we were ever going to get anything going on the special teams, but the big thing was we didn't make any mistakes in special teams, because for much of the game it was a possession focused, don't make mistakes type game. until it got broken open in the fourth quarter. So luckily we were able to keep field position for most part and weather the storm there because it got a little hairy there for a second. Yeah,
Speaking
but
of
really
special
impressive
teams, real
win.
quick.
What's that?
I said, speaking of special teams, real quick. I think you've ended the kicking competition, and it's Stone Harrington's job. Did
Dude, that was
that kick from what 57, 58 yards? That was good from 70.
Dude, that was honestly one of my favorite moments of the game, just with the commentary from Joe Klatt. I know, obviously,
Yeah.
he's a big Big Ten guy, but then you need to put somebody back there, which is true, right? 58 yards. He's not going to have the leg. God, he smoked that ball and kicked it into next week, dude. I think it's still floating in the
Well,
air.
then Coach Johnson was all like, Gus Johnson after it was like stones. And I was like, I love having Gus on the call.
Yeah, but yeah, what
Love
a
some
great
Gus
environment.
Johnson.
With that, I mean, any other major takeaways that y'all had from the game? I mean, obviously we come out on top. The game gets away from them in the fourth quarter. I mean, that was to Dallas's first point. Like that's the biggest game of the year, possibly. You went into a road environment and came out victorious. And so, I mean, what a great, as Joey always says, what a great day to be a Red Raider.
Yeah, I think anything now, especially I think anything other than 10-2 is a disappointment easily. I mean,
Yeah.
So
Hey,
I know that was
any
the big
thoughts
thing
with
before the season.
what were you gonna say,
Any thoughts
Dallas?
with what?
I was gonna say, any thoughts with the tight ends and how because it seems like that was their safety blanket was that Bentley guy, and obviously he's a good option, but he seemed to be a hole in our defense if there was something to point out.
I mean, he really
I'm
only
not super
had the
concerned
one
about dump offs
big
with the tight
play.
end.
No, I was gonna say I'm not too concerned about that. I think he got one or two of the pass interference calls where we just didn't time up hitting him like quite right. We're just a little
Yeah,
early. I think in pass coverage, I've watched the PFF show. Jacob Rodriguez was in coverage for he had like 5 balls thrown. He played well in coverage. He just kind of got loose in the middle of the field there and had a big play. Yeah, I mean, anytime you average 4 yards a pass attempt, I don't care who the ball is going to. That's pretty impressive.
yeah, yeah. All in all, a great game. In the midst of it, there was a quarterback change, and so Hammond got dinged up in the first half, and then obviously took that blow in the second half when he was running, hit his head on the turf as well, and so that was a little bit nerve wracking. He took a little bit of a beating, but with that, Hammond comes into the game and plays spectacular. Goes 13 for 16 with 169 yards, 2 touchdowns, and obviously had 61 yards rushing as well. So looked really good. We've talked about the we talked about the Utah environment and how stoked that crowd was. What a difference maker in that game. Is there anything to take away from that Hammond and Morton debate, or what are y'all's thoughts overall from that taking place? I'll toss it over to Dallas.
So I know this is going to be a hot topic, especially with the bye week where it is. Um, I'm guessing Morton has a concussion just from like the way it sounded, getting hit in the head like that and then not coming
Mhm.
back. But I just judging off of the way Joey was talking about it in the post game presser, how Morton looked up until that point. I think he's going to stay the starting quarterback. You know, Will's had like some up and down moments up until uh the game yesterday, through like a couple of interceptions in the Oregon State game when he came in. Uh so I don't know if they completely trust him not to make like mistakes. I do think his ceiling is higher than Barron, and you can make the argument, hey, like get him in there, get him experience so that he can work through some of those mistakes. But I think when you have a defense this dominant, you want a guy that's maybe going to manage the game a little bit. And I do think over the long stretch, Morton might be that guy, even if Hammond's a better quarterback in the long run.
Yeah, I definitely. I've said that the ceiling, it seems pretty high for Hammond. He is more prone to mistakes, I think, and that comes with experience and time and just knowledge of the system. There were a couple arid throws where he got a little bit lucky where he threw it over the middle, and Douglas bailed him out once, and then just really close. If that ball goes any higher, can get picked off pretty easily. But outside of that. I agree with the point is you want somebody that's going to be able to manage the game because the defense, it felt like a Big Ten game for a long time where the defense was just able to bail you out. I won't even say bail you out. I mean, you played field position and, at any time you kicked it to him, you got the ball back pretty much. So I understand that concept. I think bye week can come at a better time. Obviously, that's easy to say with Morton going out with an injury. But that'll give him time to get healthy. I don't think Morton's played phenomenal, throughout the course of this year. And when he's healthy, he's really great. So, I think we have a great backup that will eventually take the reins, the following year. But I don't think there's a conversation really to be had, unless he did, because he did take a lot of hits too. So unless he tweaks something, I think it's Morton's job, and you're really happy with the guy in waiting that you have with Hammond because obviously he looks excellent.
I also don't think Morton really played like horribly. Like through the first like quarter and a half, like he looked solid. Then he got kind of banged up, taking that shot to the ribs. The two interceptions, I mean, it's just bad ball placement. He had the one to CD where he's kind of throwing it off his back foot and underthrows it, and then the other one to Coy. I mean, I think Coy's still got to come down with that ball, but you want to see that more towards the sideline. Um, he also then, unfortunately, like his stats and the offense performed much worse for that stretch because, I mean, the offensive line was getting a false start to start every single drive. So it's tough to go on the road to Utah and start first and 15, second and 20 for like 3, 4 straight drives and be able to be successful. So I think that kind of plays into it. I mean, we saw Will Hammond come in against TCU and light them up for like a quarter and a half, and then you saw kind of some of the freshman mistakes start to happen towards the end of that game last year. Um, yeah, like I said, I think Will Hammond's ceiling is the roof, and he'll be an excellent quarterback in the future. But I think they're still going to stick with Morton just because they've got a little bit more confidence.
Yeah, and they talk a lot about Hammond's character, uh, and he's not pressing for that either. He knows his role on the team, and he did exactly what he's supposed to in this game, and eventually it will be handed off to him. But he did exactly what he was supposed to. They say do your job, right, and that's exactly what he did in this instant. I like the point that you had brought up. I don't know if it came up yet, but he benefited from them Utah just getting worn down, right? It was they seemed gassed. I mean, Urban Meyer touched on it at halftime. He said the defense was huffing and puffing. And so, he gets in there. Sure, there were still some penalties, but with Morton having to try to make up for all the penalties they had in the first half was not an ideal situation. You already mentioned the picks, but luckily they weren't back-breaking picks. They were a little bit down the field. It almost felt like a punt in both scenarios. So, who's to say that he doesn't perform or start benefiting from that worn down Utah defense as well? Because, it eventually broke. Was a little bit worried about that with our defense as well. We didn't touch on this, but I think something to talk about too is we're deep, man. They were able to
Yeah.
rotate those guys in, and even the backups were making plays, and it's just real nice to have just the luxury of being able to be 8 deep on that defensive line and keep everybody fresh. So I think maybe Utah didn't benefit as much from that, and it kind of showed. Sure, they had some big plays, but those guys got tired after a while.
Yeah, I think when you've got guys coming in behind Lee Hunter and Skylar Gill Howard in the interior, like when you got AJ Holmes and Cofield and on the edge. Terrell Tillman has really come on since like the latter half of last year. Like they don't miss much of a beat, man. Like you don't notice it like in previous Tech years where we bring out a defensive lineman and then the other opponent just runs it right at the dude and they pick up 7, 8 yard chunks. Like it makes me feel like a lot better for next year when we lose that entire starting defensive line. It's like there will be probably a drop off, but I think that we're in a really good spot to be able to step up there.
Yeah, I do too. And they're getting a lot of good experience and a lot of good role models. I think that's the other thing. We pay for this defensive line, but they seem all really to mesh well together. A lot of really great veteran leaders. And I think the younger guys are getting to learn a lot from them as well. So I do, to your point, think they'll benefit greatly from that. And obviously, we see the recruiting trail benefiting as well for it. So, hopefully it just becomes a cycle and, Tech continues to stay relevant for the long haul. But hey, any final?
One thing also like as far as like just like a mentally tough team, I think there's been several games and moments already in this year where any other Tech team slips up or falls in their face. We've had uh the rain delays and then the team comes out and looks even better following that up. You go on the road to Utah, have 1,000 false start penalties, and the defense is out there a ton, and they just continue to step up. The offensive line gets it in gear and starts pushing around people. That's just like a culture and like an attitude thing that, that's what everybody in the offseason was harping on Tech about is, oh, how do you get all these like highly paid NIL mercenaries, what they called them, to come together as a team. And I think Joey McGuire, out of all people in the country, that's like the thing he does best. For as much as we might want to rip on him for not having a silent count, like he gets dudes bought in and wanting to like live and die for each other.
Yeah, dude, culture warrior. I mean, great man. I mean, you just hear all the stories about him, and perfect guy for that job. Because I do think these guys enjoy playing for him, and just enjoy being Red Raiders. So I just think that goes to show. I think those questions were answered in that type of environment with that type of adversity, backs against the wall. How do you come out? And they showed up as a team, performed as a team, and won as a team. So super excited. But any final takeaways from that game? Obviously, it was massive, huge win, great day to be a Red Raider. Big 12, watch out. But what were any final takeaways for you?
Man, I think we'll probably see over the next like 3, 4 weeks how like Utah looks against the rest of the Big 12. But if they are one of the top teams in the conference, which I think they will be, I think this like sets up for Tech to be something more than just a Big 12 contender. I think that I'm kind of a Josh Pate guy, although I know a lot of Big 12 fans and you in particularly don't like him. One thing on his show this past week, he mentioned that we might need to have a conversation if Utah or Texas Tech really beat up on one of the other teams about them not just competing for the conference, but the Big 12 actually having like a national championship contender. And I think those are the discussions that might start coming up here soon after a performance like this.
No, I think it's warranted, and I like Josh Pate. It's just anytime there's a big media outlet, and rightfully so, the Big 12's never mentioned very much. But I think that's credit to us for this past week, and hopefully we can have more people start talking about it. And not else to say, there's still quite a bit of teams in the Big 12 that can still rattle off a decent amount of wins and be a 10 win program. And so I'm going to be interested to see how this conversation finishes because. You're going to hopefully in the coming weeks have 5 or 6 teams in the top 25. Sure, they'll be on the back end of it, but tough conference, performed pretty well in the non-con, 8-6 against the Power 4 teams. So, I think there's definitely conversation to be had. ACC obviously has very top heavy, but the gap is definitely closing. So I'm pretty excited about this year relative to that. But with that, we can go around the Big 12 real quick and just talk about some of the outcomes. And so as I pull them up, I'll kind of just pull them up right now. Tulsa, Oklahoma State. Obviously, Gundy is probably on the hot seat there, but
Yeah.
I just don't know if he wants to be there anymore either.
Yeah, I think with all the change in college football, he's lost the fire and to really go and attack uh and get better. I don't know if he really wants to be that guy anymore. He was always the young gun who would uh get his players like fighting and developing, but like that's just been out the window lately. I don't know what changed in that locker room, but it's pretty bad.
Yeah, a lot of turnover on that roster, and it just doesn't seem like they really bought into him either. So I really enjoy watching Gundy, his press conferences, his just success at Oklahoma State in general. And so you hate to see it kind of come to potentially an end. If not at the soon, maybe towards the end of the season, but I'm a little bit disappointed in general. But we move on. SMU, TCU edges out the victory. You're looking at considering them probably ranked in the very near future. I don't know if they moved into the top 25 or not.
I think they
Uh,
were that BYU and TCU were 24 and 25. I can't remember which was higher, but they're both ranked this week.
but impressive win against an ACC opponent. Hoover continues to look really impressive, throwing for near 400 yards, 5 touchdowns. I mean, that's just another example of different styles of Big 12. That's pretty much a common one is quarterback play, but good game from him there.
Yeah, I agree. I think that they're one of the few teams that will have a chance to go potentially like undefeated or like 8-1 if they really execute. They don't have. I mean, they've got a tougher schedule, but they don't play Tech. I think they miss Utah potentially. I need to look at their schedule, but yeah, I definitely think that they're a contender to make it to Arlington.
Yep, and then we touched on getting another team in. They do play Arizona State next week, and they have Iowa State and BYU, but no Utah or Texas Tech. So obviously, when you talk about getting that second team into the college football playoffs, they have Baylor as well. So there'll be some resume builder opportunities there for them. The thing will be, can they come out unscathed? Because it is a tough schedule. And they will play a few more ranked opponents through the course of it. But kudos to them for being able to pull that out. North Carolina versus UFC. I was not expecting this outcome, but kudos to UCF for winning 34-9. That North Carolina team feels like a failed, just a failed effort.
Yeah, I mean, do they fire Belichick after 1 year? Because this is horrendous. This is.
I don't know. I think maybe it's mutually parting ways because maybe he's just not cut out for the college game. I just think there's too much on the sideline stuff. You see those videos going viral of him and his girlfriend. But I don't know. It'll be interesting. Obviously, it was a road game. What's that?
He's kind of Belichick's all of a sudden kind of got that like I don't know, that crazy old man vibe who like you talk to him, it's like, man, he's something ain't right. Like he's lost whatever it was that made him great. And I don't know if it's maybe just his confidence after Brady left. He's like, well, he
It's
hadn't
almost
been
like
as
the
successful.
dedication. Like, does he still love it? And I don't know if the answer to that.
Yeah, it's like he has to still be in football, but maybe he doesn't want to actually take the time to be great at football anymore.
Yeah, and it's not easy. Again, we talk about the transfer portal a lot. They pretty much replace the entire roster with people. And so you think about the opposite end of the spectrum where sure, it's really cool to play for Bill Belichick, but it hasn't gone great. And so we'll see what happens. But UCF able to get a win there. West Virginia, Kansas, a Big 12 matchup. Kansas is another team that prolific offense, been putting up points. Really, the only loss to Missouri, in which they definitely had a shot at winning that game. And so that's another team to note. Impressive win against West Virginia. Maybe it's not an impressive win, but still
Well,
did
to
what they were
dominate them
supposed
like
to.
that.
Yeah. And Kansas obviously will play us. And they have Iowa State and Utah. So there's still a couple of games where, they can
I
make
mean,
a
if they
statement.
win both of those games, they'll be ranked heading into Lubbock.
Yeah.
That could be a really big game.
So not many takeaways there. I mean, big game here. Arizona State Baylor started picking up in the fourth quarter. I was like, where's the offense at? And definitely started picking up. We were close to overtime, but Arizona State able to hold on and last second field goal to win the game. That's a big game. Baylor hates to drop that one because they definitely would have needed it. But Arizona State starting to become relevant again. Obviously, they won the Big 12 last year, but there were a couple of concerns. They look like they're back on the right track now, though.
Yeah, I still not quite a believer in Arizona State though. I think they won that turnover battle like 3-0 and still needed a last second field goal to win the game. Um, I don't know. I guess we'll see. It's going to be a tough atmosphere when we go on the road to there, just because of I think all of Tech's road games are going to have a little extra juice just because of the expectation of the team. We're going to have a target on our back, but um, I don't know. They've just lost an edge, I think, to them. I think they'll still be okay. They'll be a bowl team, but maybe 8-4 kind of team, middle of the pack, Big 12.
Yeah. Big game, though. Arizona State edges them out, so we'll see what happens. BYU, Eastern Carolina. I know there were a couple people that were saying, watch out for Eastern Carolina. BYU, just, the type of team that they are, they really weather people down. And Bachmeier is going to continue to grow up, really. I mean, right, true freshman or whatever he is. So really just needs some time to cook. But as long as they can manage possessions and score and handle the clock, they'll be a pretty scary team because they got Morton 2 in the backfield. So pretty ground and pound type team there.
Yeah, I didn't get to watch this game, but I saw the box score. Did they let East Carolina put up like over 400 yards of offense on them?
It's the quarterback has 285, so I'm assuming they got pretty close to it.
Yeah, so I know they didn't give up too many points, but I thought that was pretty surprising because BYU's been pounding their chest about how great their defense is. Um, I think Tech, we'll be going to that game up in Lubbock against BYU in November. I think Tech matches up really good against them. It'd be good for Tech if they were still considered a contender for the Big 12 at that point, because I think that like literally I don't trust Bachmeier to throw the ball at all, and I think we could really stop him in the run game and potentially run it up on him.
Yeah, for sure. Hopefully, we'll see. And then the last game, Wyoming, Colorado. Colorado bounces back against so-so Wyoming team, albeit it was in Colorado. So, I don't think there's really too much to write about there. Good for them to get a victory. We'll see what happens. They had a quarterback. Salter played for him that one, threw for 300 yards and 3 TDs. So, good for them to get back on track.
Yeah. I mean, we'll see what they look like in Big 12 play. Are they still gonna keep doing this like 3 quarterback system where they're swapping out every game, or are they gonna land on a guy?
I don't know, to be honest. It'll be interesting to see what Dion says. I mean, obviously that kid played pretty well this past game, so I don't know if you kind of let him just ride it for the time being, because it doesn't look like he had any turnovers and was pretty efficient, 18 of 28. Now, that being said, they're about to go into a gauntlet of a schedule with BYU, TCU, Iowa State, Utah, and Arizona State, Arizona. So that is going to be a rough stretch in which you can imagine that you might change quarterbacks if things aren't going well. So it's definitely a
Yeah.
possibility just with that schedule they have.
Yeah. I just need to see more from them, I guess, to really have an opinion.
Yeah. But those were the games around the Big 12s. Some impressive victories, some critical losses for a couple of teams. Obviously, it's still very early on in the season. But any final thoughts from the Big 12?
No, I mean, I think, Tech, I'm just the national pundits, even people who cover the Big 12 after this Utah Tech game have got Tech as the team to beat. And then they're a tier above everyone else. So I think we're the most talented team. We've got a relatively easy schedule. It's still the Big 12. There's still a lot of teams that can come up and uh, play with us, but I think we should probably be favored in the rest of the games throughout the year. Just need to keep improving and not pay attention to any outside noise, which I think this team has a bunch of leaders to be able to do that.
Yeah, but definitely a bunch of veteran leaders. And, I think that's where, obviously a lot of the pundits focus on the SEC and Big Ten, and they just kind of default to saying, oh, the Big 12 is a cluster, right? And it is. But I thought Brady Quinn said it well, right? There's tears to this, it feels like this year. And, sure, you can drop a game that you're not supposed to. That happens to everybody. And so you got to take care of business. Luckily, defense travels, right? And so as long as that strength of yours can continue to show out, hopefully we'll be fine. But yeah, I do think the narrative's changing a little bit. But that middle Big 12, I mean, there's a lot of really good teams that can beat anybody, any given Saturday, right? And so super excited to see what happens with that. But yeah, good start to the season. Any final takeaways for you?
No, man, let's go win the bye.
The bye week's next. Better watch out. We're gonna handle it, but that's my opinion too. Let's go 5-0 this week.
Exactly.
Well, with that, thank you all for joining us this week. Anthony left early, but Dallas, appreciate you taking the time to sit down and have a conversation. And with that, wreck 'em.
Find out everything runs through
TechNTortillas.
everything runs through
TechNTortillas.